Okay, today I am using my Frederick's Red Label canvas in 12 by 16. And as you can tell, I already have my Lotus drawn on here. Now I did grid this, draw my Lotus, and then I just lightly erased some of these lines because I don't want any of that color showing through my background. And my background may be a little bit transparent. If you need a little bit of help with gridding, knowing how to grid or how to resize your image for the canvas that you want to use, you can either check the information iCard up here, or there's a link in the video description below. Both of them will take you to my blog post where I show you how to take any image and apply a grid to it. You're always free to print out the reference image as well and trace it on there if that's what you really want to do. And the reference image with the grid can be downloaded from my website for free, and there's a link in the video description below. Now I'm going to start with my background, so the area right up through here, and on our image you can tell it's a lot of yellows, browns, a little bit of green. There's even some blue. Now for the background, I'm going to use my 5/8 inch angle brush, and I've got my colors here. Got some cad yellow, yellow oxide, burnt sienna, and burnt umber, as well as a little bit of white. I do have matte medium. I would say for this painting, matte medium's pretty important, but as always, you're welcome to try and do it without it. So I wet my brush in my jar a little and then wiped it on a paper towel because I don't want it to be terribly wet. I'm going to start right in this area, this nice light area, and I'm just kind of making a decision about what colors I feel like make up that area. So I'm just going to grab a little of those two. Maybe I'll grab a little hint of my burnt sienna and some white, a good amount of white. Nice pale color. A little bit of matte medium. I want you to notice how much paint I have on my brush here. It's really not a ton of paint. If you use huge globs of paint here, you're going to have a really difficult time blending. So what I'm going to do is just kind of lay down the paint that's on my brush, and then up on the very tip, just kind of break it up. See how I'm not using my brush flat? Just kind of up on the chisel edge, and see how it kind of smooths it out and makes it disappear. So like I said, if you use a heavy amount of paint here, if you have a glob of paint, this is gonna do nothing but frustrate you. So make sure that you use just a little bit of paint. You can always add layers. You know, you can always come back and add more, but if you have too much, you're kind of stuck with it. I'm just going to change my color a little bit somehow. Still not using a ton of paint. Maybe I'll throw a little more yellow in there. And a little matte medium. Let's go right here. So I lay down that little blob and break it up. It's that very chisel edge pressure too that's helping me blend. If I'm trying to blend like that, see, I'm just getting heavy brush stroke marks. But just up on the tip, kind of sketch it a little. I'm also not overly concerned about getting my colors or even the shadows and lighter colors in the exact same place as on my reference image. It's just there as a reference, you know, I can look at it and I can make decisions, but ultimately I'm free to do it however I want. See, I grabbed a totally different color, but up on the tip of that brush, and I can easily, with very light pressure, get those colors to blend together. My brush is a little wet, that's why you're seeing a bit more brush stroke marks, so there I'm just dusting over it to get rid of those. I may end up doing a layer or two in some places. I really like this burnt sienna in this painting. It mixes so well with these other colors. Just a hint of white in there. Matte medium. And we'll get some of that there. Put down that blob and break it up. If ever you're having a hard time blending, let's say that you're the previous color dries. So let's pretend that that's dry, and it's actually getting there. If that color's dry and you're having a hard time blending into it, that's what matte medium is for. That's gonna help you so much. So see, I'm having a little bit of a harder time. I'm just gonna pick up the tiniest bit of matte medium on the end of my brush and do the same brush stroke. And it blends it right in. Actually, a little matte medium. I'm gonna kind of thin this bit down because I do like the little bit of green that's in the reference image there. So I wanna leave a space for that. I want you to take your time here. I know that's really my mantra lately is take your time, but I know that so many of you, you feel like you have to rush. And rushing does nothing but cause anxiety. And I know that there's enough anxiety to go around, Why do we need to make more while we're painting? I know that I've got plenty of it without bringing some of it into painting, so I'm not going to. I'm going to take my time. But I know that it's difficult for you sometimes when you're watching me and you're seeing that, my video is an hour long, or I tell you that it's simple and it only takes me an hour, and then you sit down to do it and you're like, oh, I'm on hour 4 and I'm still only gridding it. But that's okay. I still hear so many people say, oh, I'm a slow painter. I just picked up a little matte medium there. I'm gonna break up this line. I'm gonna leave a little space in here for that greenish color. But again, you guys, I've told you this so many times, there's no such thing as a slow painter, and there's no reason that you have to worry about being a slow painter. Let's pick up a little bit of this burnt umber. Notice I'm not cleaning off my brush at all throughout this painting. Just mix it in there, tiny point of matte medium, and we'll darken it through here a bit. Watching this paint blend is, for me, it's a really satisfying thing. So rushing through it isn't an option because I rather enjoy watching it kind of, streak and have the transition line into the next color just disappear. I really, really like that. And I know that if I rushed, if I tried to do it quickly, I'd lose out on a lot of that. I wouldn't be able to see that. So I just kind of cross-hatched a little of that dark in there, back up to the tippy toe of my brush. Smooth it. Oh, also, I get a lot of questions about how did I choose my color palette for a painting. So if you're interested in that, interested in knowing how I pick my colors, then I have a video on Instagram where I show you exactly how I chose the colors for this painting. Little matte medium. So make sure you follow me on Instagram because I just started my IGTV channel, which is an Instagram video platform. So it's on Instagram. You don't have to worry about searching for it. I just started that and I plan on doing, fun little things that we might not do over here, like a little video on how to choose colors. Just got my lighter color again. I'm gonna start kind of bringing that transition down. So plop that color up on the tippy toe to sketch them together. I'm not worrying about the petals just yet. I am gonna bring this color down around the petals But for the most part, I'm just going to worry about getting the background done, and then I'll deal with the petals. So I'm just kind of keeping this lighter color going through here. I can change it up a little whenever I want. Maybe darken it or make it brighter. And because of the matte medium, you know, the matte medium makes everything a little bit transparent. You might be looking at some of your brush strokes on here and thinking, oh, that looks terrible. But please don't worry about it right now, because this area, just like, you know, everything else that we do, you can do it in layers. So if there's something you don't like, even just taking another transparent layer over it later, it will totally change the way it looks, and I think you'll be happier with it. So don't sweat that right now. Just worry about covering the background and kind of getting an idea for where you want your different colors. But also in our image, in our reference image, the background, you know, it's a background that's blurred out. There's maybe plants or something back there. So there are little areas that aren't quite so blended. Maybe it's a little bit more, you know, you can tell that there's a form there, or, you know, it abruptly goes from one color to the next. So your brush stroke marks are going to be okay. They're going to help kind of mimic that look. And also, as I always like to say, your painting was created with a brush. Why not make it look like it was created with a brush? Right about here is where that blue spot is on my image, and I don't really understand what's going on there, so I'm just going to leave it out. If you want to put it in, that's perfectly fine. I'm going to leave some room there for a little green right in here. A little more burnt umber. Make sure you can see that. Sometimes I get lost in my own little world and forget that you can't see something. So I'm not really scrubbing with this angle brush. I know that sometimes when I scrub with brushes, it makes some of you nervous. I'm not really scrubbing. It's just kind of flipping it back and forth like that. My brush is getting super gunked up, and I like that. Okay, I did clean off my brush because now I'm going to go into the green. So I have a little bit of phthalo blue, which is very, very strong, so please be aware of that. I'm going to grab some of my yellow oxide, some of my cad yellow, mix them together, go into my white, and then I'm just taking the very corner of my brush. See that? There's almost no blue on there. But phthalo blue is so strong that if you get too much right off the bat, it's going to be practically blue. So I'd rather have you work just a tiny bit in at a time. Oh, that might have been too much. That was quite a bit. Maybe we'll start there and see how that is. Little matte medium. And right in here, plop it down, break it up. And that color I'm working on is dry. So to make it look like it blends, little matte medium, light pressure. And look at that. Let's pull a little more yellow in. Just change up the color a bit. I just wanted to pull you in there a little bit so you can see again how this is dry. And that just the very tip of the brush pressure. See how you can still see the color right there through the color, but that's okay. Don't let things like that bother you. I didn't even pick up any extra matte medium. I'm just, see, just kind of like that. And it's helping break that color up. Thin it out. Maybe let's just put a tiny bit of a darker green, just a teeny tiny bit, right here. Let's keep adding a bit of green here and there. Some areas, maybe I'll grab a little bit of my brown just to dull that green down a little. We don't need our green to be bright everywhere. And kick that in here. Ooh, I like that color a lot. It's totally different than on my image, but I like it. And you know what? That's all that matters, is how I feel about what I'm painting. So when you're painting, please understand that if it looks different than mine or your reference image, as long as you like the way it looks, that is all that matters. You should only paint to please yourself. A little matte medium. I think I'm going to darken that just a bit, little brown, little blue. There we go. And same up in this corner, and I'm going to use more brown and more blue. I want it darker and more muted. And the burnt umber and phthalo blue just make the most gorgeous color anyway. I love to use those two colors mixed together. That is about perfect. That's about exactly what I was looking for there. Start laying that down in here. Some of these colors are a little on the transparent side, and then, you know, the matte medium in them, so I can see my brush strokes a little bit more. Ooh, that's good. Nice jewel tone color there. So if you're using colors that are quite transparent, like I am right now, and you're finding that it's just getting really transparent, see that? You can see my brush stroke really, really strongly. Just finish how you're working on it. Just finish the little area you're working on. Let it dry, and then come back and layer it. Like, no amount of trying to get rid of those brush strokes here is going to work, so I'm just going to leave it for now. Okay, this is all dry now, and I can kind of work at bringing a little bit more dimension or changing the color, getting rid of brush stroke marks to any of these areas. Same brush, barely damp. I am gonna lighten up my light area right here just a little bit, I think. So some of my yellows and my white, nice pale color, much more pale than before, but not a ton of paint. Little matte medium. Plop it down and break it up. So that matte medium, if you're not familiar with it, what it's doing is kind of twofold. It gives me a little bit more working time, keeps the paint wet a little bit longer, but also it thins the paint down so that it's a bit more transparent. And when it's transparent, see how I took that super light color right over into there? You can definitely see it. It changed it, but it has not covered everything. And that helps us get depth rather than just having big blops of color that are, you know, kind of smeared into each other. It actually layers and shows off all of them. And I think that that's really effective, and it helps build dimension, and I really enjoy that. And it doesn't take a lot of matte medium. See, I made this color, it's a little lighter, but it's very thin, very transparent. So if I had areas where I felt like, you know, it just didn't blend real well, sometimes when you're doing this, when you're going into a different color, sometimes you get that and you're like, that just, the brushstroke marks are awful. It doesn't blend nicely. So right here, let's say that I feel that way about this spot, and I really don't, but let's say I do. So I have this color, a little bit of matte medium, plop it down right there, super light pressure to break it up. And see both of those colors, the brown and the green, you can still see them through the paint, but now it's not quite so dramatic, the change from one color to the next. And so I can do that wherever I feel like I need it. I'm gonna get just a little point of white. It's barely any paint at all. I just really want to pop some brightness right up in there. I might have to wait until it dries a little bit. Let's work on some of these darker areas. A little bit of burnt umber, matte medium, and we'll just darken it up right here. Plop that down, tip of the brush, maybe a little more matte medium to thin it out. Sketch just a bit of that color out through here. I think it makes it look more interesting and dynamic, because if this is, you know, like some kind of a garden that's in bokeh back here, it's all blurred out. If we were to see that without the blur, we would see little bits of plants overlapping the plant next to it. So if we have our colors here that just kind of stop when it gets to the next color, it's gonna look kind of fake and forced. So that's why I really like to take that color and just kind of, you know, scoot it into another color just a bit. The more layers you have, the more depth, the more interesting it's gonna be. Never be afraid to let those colors touch. Let's get just a hint of that blue, some of my yellows. There we go. Let's throw a little brown in there so it's a bit darker, because I still have some white on my brush. I probably should have cleaned it off, but I'm not terribly worried about that. Tiny bits of blue at a time. That was way too much blue. That's okay. I'm just going for a nice dark kind of muted green. There we go, little matte medium. And now right here where I have all these brush stroke marks, I can kind of start again. See how I plopped it over there? Little matte medium, and the same thing. And now the fact that those brush stroke marks are there is okay because it's just giving a bit of dimension through that color. But see how it's not quite so dramatic anymore. I just love to change colors on a whim. Never be afraid to let your brush get completely muddied and gunked up with all kinds of colors, especially when they overlap and mix like all of these colors here are doing. I mean, obviously when we start moving into the blue or the pink, I'm gonna wash off my brush because I want those colors to be fairly pure. That's looking much better, much more like what I was going for in the first place. I'm just going to finish up with a little burnt umber, really deepen this corner here. And then we can start kind of working down a little bit and get into the water. This is a really satisfying part for me. I love to watch these colors, the way that they play together and change each other, the way the layers glow through each other. It's all really quite satisfying to me. And I hope that you find satisfaction in that as well. I hope that you find satisfaction in every part of the process, because that's what art should be about. It shouldn't be about, hurrying and knocking out a painting. And I mean, that's what work is for, right? Don't treat art like work. I find that, art is my job, but I find that when I treat it like work, it feels like work. And I don't like that. I want it to be enjoyable. All right, a little more of my yellows, maybe a little bit of that burnt sienna into my white. I still haven't cleaned off my brush. Nice pale color. I am going to start bringing that down, start working around the edge of my flower. So I'm going to use the angle of my angle brush to my advantage there to start carving out the shape of those petals. If you need to go to a smaller brush here, that's okay. I very well may go to a smaller brush in a minute. And see, that paint is dry. A little matte medium. And it's almost like it's not. There. Now I know I'm going to get asked, why didn't I just paint the whole background this color and then put the flower on top of it? Reds are notoriously transparent, and I will be using quinacridone, which is very transparent. And if I did all of this and then tried to do the red over top of it, I would really struggle with that. I would have these colors and values glowing through, and I don't want that. So I know it seems challenging to paint around an element, but either way, you're gonna have a challenge, right? You're either gonna be challenged to paint around elements, or you're gonna be challenged to not make your background show through your subject. So, whichever one is easier for you to handle is perfectly fine. If you would rather paint the whole background and then come back and do your flower on top of that, that is completely up to you. This is your painting I can't tell you how to do it. I can tell you how I'm doing it, but ultimately, that's up to you. You're not required to do anything I'm doing. I'm just changing my color up here and there. I'm trying to keep it a little on the lighter side for the most part, but as far as what color it is, I don't really care. We're almost done with this background. Well, with this top part, and then we'll do the water. We'll do our flower last. Because the flower is it's the most delicate part of our painting, right? It's our subject, it's what we want to look at. So if we need to make adjustments to anything, I would rather have to make adjustments to my background or, you know, accidentally cover up part of my background that's not the subject of my painting, than have to make adjustments to my flower or accidentally cover up parts of my flower. Because the background, ultimately, it doesn't matter what it looks like. It just matters that it's there. But the flower, it absolutely matters what it looks like. That's why I do it last. Now here, this is going to be the most challenging part for me, simply because I'm painting around a camera. But I want you to be aware of it as well. Now remember, we have water here. Water sits level. Water doesn't sit like this. So make sure that your horizon here is relatively about the same, and that your water, as we start doing that and have the lines, that they are horizontal, that they are perpendicular to the bottom edge or the top edge of your canvas. Make sure they don't start to slant. That's a little challenging for me because I'm trying to paint around a camera, so I'm kind of standing off to the side. So if mine start to angle, you know why. So I'm looking at how far I brought it down on the sides here, and the blue can cover that a little. I just want to make sure that I don't have it going, you know, really high on one side, so I have to compensate for that somewhere else. If ever you have a color that is, you know, you're trying to blend too light of a color into too dark of a color. So here where that's nice and dark, and I've got a little bit of a lighter color, let me show you how I'm going to do that. Let's get some yellow. I think I want to throw the tiniest hint of green in there too. There we go. Some white. Just a nice pale green color. Completely different, much lighter than the color that I'm going to, above where I'm going to put this. So I'm going to put a bit of this right here. See how dramatically different that is to that brown? That can be kind of challenging if you're not sure how to blend into that, and you might get frustrated. So I'm going to show you. I'm just going to pretend like it's not an issue right now. Doing the same thing, but don't keep trying to take it up, up, up in order to get rid of that line. Instead, I'm just going to wipe some of that off. I'm going to go back into my brown, just a little bit of it. Maybe I'll get a little bit of this brown too. And then, a little point to matte medium, right on top of where they meet. See that? And break that up. And since that first brown was dry, the green had a hard time blending into it. But when I add this second brown on top of it, the green is wet. They blend into each other nicely. Okay, now we can move into the water. For now, I'm going to stick with my 5/8 inch angle brush. I may change it here in just a little bit. And I'm going to use my phthalo blue and my white. I'm going to grab a bit of phthalo blue, a little bit more than we were using before, because we are actually going for blue. I'm going to bring it over here, mix it into my white. Yes, all those other colors are mixing in there, and that is okay, because I like this blue to have a slight greenish hint to it anyway. So I'm going to take the tiniest little corner of cad yellow and mix it in there. I'm not trying to turn it green. I'm just kind of trying to get the green bias of the phthalo blue to stand out. Little matte medium. And we're going to start just kind of right here. So everything is horizontal here, but it's also blurred out, especially in the back. Toward the front, it gets much more, you know, solid and crisp. So I'm still kind of doing the same type of thing, just getting that color on there. Let's pull it through here. Kind of carving around those petals. And remembering to keep that fairly level. I have to keep getting way back because I'm kind of crooked already, but I'm not done, so just kind of wiggle that through there a bit. Little matte medium. Oh, that was a lot of matte medium. And very lightly, just kind of break that in. It's probably going to take a couple of layers to get that looking the way I want it to look, and that's okay. I'm just going to soften the line because I don't want to have to deal with a hard line later. There we go. Let's do that on the other side as well. It's okay if this color's a little different. It's on a different side of the flower. The light might be hitting it a little bit different. And if you wanted to drab it down, you could always throw a little hint of the brown in there as well. Stand back, make sure that it's even with this side. If you can see your grid lines, that will help you. And I can still kind of see my grid lines. I'm not overly worried about where some of that green is. In our reference image, you can see there's some green, some reflections in the water. Right now, I'm not terribly concerned about that. I may leave a couple little spots blank here and there so that I can come back and add some of that in. But if I end up covering all of this, that's okay. I think I am going to change my brush. The horizontal isn't really working for me with this brush. I'm just going to get that petal edge there. All right, I'm going to go to my scrubby number 8 filbert. It doesn't matter that this is a filbert. It doesn't matter that it's a number 8. The only thing that matters is that I'm comfortable doing just a little bit of scrubbing with it, and that it's a size that I'm comfortable with. So if you don't have a brush just like this, see how puffy my brush is? It's okay. Just make sure that you're comfortable with it. I'm going to do a little bit of scrubbing, so I want to make sure that it's not a brush that I'm worried about ruining. A little more blue. I'm just going to throw it in there and use that mixture. Now we are starting to get down into the bottom third where our water is taking on a little bit more detail. So see, I'm still using really the same type of brush stroke as I was using up above. Very light pressure there to break up any lines. Keep everything as horizontal as possible. And change your color up whenever you like. I'm not going to worry about filling in all of the white of the canvas because I need some area for those reflection colors too. If you have to go along the edge of the flower like that, please make sure that you scrub that out after, because if you have that line that's kind of outlining it, that's going to stand out like a sore thumb later. Let's throw just a hint of that cad yellow in there. Whoa, that was a lot of cad yellow. I don't want straight up green. Just a green flavor. Little matte medium, there we go. There's so much going on in the water in this image. So don't make yourself crazy trying to perfectly mimic the water, because you really could make yourself crazy there. I'm just kind of, you know, paying attention to the important things. And the important things are that it's blurry in the background, which makes it seem more distant. And we have a little more detail toward the foreground, and as well as quite a few color changes. That's really all I'm focusing on. That's all I'm interested in. But as far as my colors being exact or, you know, I don't care. A little more white. I do want to add a little bit of a lighter color right back in here. Maybe I won't worry about this area so much because I need to go back in a bit anyway and make sure that's blended in there. It's not blended right now, but both of those areas are too wet to really do much blending, so I'm just going to leave them for now. So just kind of dig into this part, you know, watch the shape evolve, watch the colors change, and, you know, just enjoy it. And remember, please always remember that you are not stuck with anything. If there's something you don't like in here, you're not stuck with it. Let it dry, paint over it later. I'm just going to kind of find that little enjoyable spot and, you know, watch this come to life. I don't think you guys can hear that. but there's squirrels running around on the roof right above my head. That's kind of fun. I like squirrels. So that's kind of fun to listen to, you know, while I'm working on my painting. Now right here is where the water tension kind of comes up and it touches the flower, so it's kind of curved. So I want to start being aware of things like that. So I don't want to paint over that little bit. And it is quite dark in that area under the flower. So I'm going to keep my blue pretty low right here. See how nice soft edges. There's a lot of paint on my brush, so I can kind of use this like a, oh, let's see, something I can compare it to. I can't think of anything, but you know, I'm really just using the tip of the brush, just like I was with the angle brush. But because I have a lot of paint in here, see how there's really nothing coming off? When I get to the point where I need more paint, I just put a little extra pressure, and there it is. And then I can go back to the tip of the brush to work on breaking it up. And only when I'm not getting much paint off of my brush, when I go flat like that, am I gonna go back and get more paint. Right this minute, I think I'm okay. Or when I decide I need to change the color, then I'll go back. Let's throw a tiny hint of yellow in there. That area is quite green in my image, and I really like that, so I think I'm going to leave it. I'll put a bit of that green in there. So just like a lot of the paintings that we've been doing so far this year, you know, this one I'm probably going to put in my level 3 paintings, but that doesn't mean that a beginner couldn't do it. The reason I'm putting paintings into a level 3 playlist right now are because I believe that those paintings require you to give yourself extra patience and time. And I know that a lot of people, they don't feel like they can have that kind of commitment. And I think that that's really what sets those paintings apart from others, you know. So that's why they still say beginner in the title. You know, I had someone who wasn't very happy with me who said that this is not a beginner painting. Well, you don't really know if you as a beginner can do it until you try. But you have to be willing to give yourself that patience and, you know, time to do it. If you can't make the patience and the time commitment, then you probably won't be able to do it. Just picked up a little bit of the phthalo blue on its own. I want to make a few spots in here that are just a little darker. Just because this is in the background doesn't mean that it's, you know, just one solid color. So I'm just going to sketch a bit of that through there. I know that looks awful right now, and that's okay. little point of matte medium and very light pressure. See how it just smears it out. There we go. A little bit of a lighter color. And another little point of matte medium. Super light pressure when I'm using that matte medium because it does kind of reactivate the paint a bit. And so if I start really scrubbing with that matte medium on there, I'm gonna start lifting paint if it's not completely dry. If you find that you're lifting paint, just let it dry and come back to it later. I cleaned off my brush. Let's get the water blended in with the background. So a little bit of my yellow color. Oh, we'll go right here. A little bit of white. Kind of a pale color. I think I'm going to grab just a hint of that blue. We'll get a color that's kind of halfway between the blue and the yellow. Little point of matte medium. Still using my filbert. Very light pressure. Just kind of sketch back and forth over it. There we go. Exactly what I was looking for. And because that blue is still kind of wet, it is mixing in there a little bit. Well, let's use this one over here because it's a bit lighter. Matte medium. Again, this is one of those areas where if you put too much pressure on your brush, you're going to just start depositing paint. And if you deposit paint here, you're going to have a really hard time blending paint. So we just want to put down enough paint. See, it's just a teeny little blob. Zoom in there so you can see. I just put down that teeny blob. There's no texture. And just the tip of my brush. And we'll finish up along here. I'm just going to mix up my color however I feel like I need to. I'm not cleaning off my brush in between. Whatever colors I need. That's pretty good. And some of this can end up being reflection in the water. So what I mean by that is, let's get that up in there. I can kind of just take a little matte medium and take a bit of this color and lightly bring it down into my water, just in a few places, wherever I like. See, all of these techniques are things we've done before. Nothing new here. We're just, paying closer attention to each brush stroke, being a little bit more mindful and aware. So trust me when I say that if it's something you want to do, you can do it. It doesn't matter if you've been painting, 2 months or 6 years or, 3 weeks. If it's something you want to do, you can do it if you're patient with yourself. All right, let's start adding our kind of green reflections through here. I have not cleaned off my brush. You can do so if you like. Just going to start grabbing some colors and making kind of a It's kind of a deep muted green. A little bit of my burnt sienna. So I'm going to mix this over here rather than over in my white like I was before. A little blue. That's pretty good. Let's throw a little burnt umber in there. And we'll start with that, see how that is. Oh yeah, that is like exactly the color I was looking for. Just take it right over that little bit of blue. Don't try and keep it just in the white. If it gets away from you and you have too much of it, you can put more blue over it later. Don't worry about that. And not all of these little ripple areas are this green. In my image, some of them to me look a little bit red, very, very dark. Especially if you look in the reference image right about here, it looks like it's almost like a black red. So I'm going to save a few of those areas for things like that. Let them have medium. Right in here is quite green, quite dark. Burnt umber. Just filling in those little white spots. And then if you need to smooth out brush stroke marks after, very light pressure, just like that. See, it just lightly smooths them out without depositing more paint or really changing what you did. I think I'm going to have to darken that a little bit more. Burnt umber is so transparent that it's really not as dark as you think it's going to be. But this is a good start. Just picked up what was left of my green. Matte medium, smooth it out. See how I let everything just overlap? That green and brown goes over top of the blue. The blue in the image to me in the photograph looks kind of phony. I mean, the colors are definitely altered, but it almost looks like, to me anyway, that color was added in after the fact. I really like the way it looks, but it kind of has some edges that are a little awkward to me, where it just kind of stops. And so I'm blending mine a little bit more than the image, because that's what I want to see. Throw a little more brown in there. There we go. See, I'm even taking that green up here where I did not have a blank spot. Always think outside the lines. Just because you made a line for yourself, you know, it doesn't mean you have to stay in it. I know when we're young, we're taught, you know, stay inside the lines. But I'm here to break that. Don't stay inside the lines. You are free to go outside the lines if you want to. Some of you are really uncomfortable with that. If you are uncomfortable with that, but it's something you want to be more comfortable with, make sure you check out my other blog post that I have on painting loosely. We have an exercise in there on, painting outside of the lines. I'm just gonna get a little hint of this green color up in here. A lot of matte medium to thin it out so it's not terribly bright. Don't be afraid to get all the way up to your flower. If you do happen to go into it a little bit, it's not a big deal. There we go. We do have a reflection of our flower in here, and I didn't draw that in. I think I'm gonna let it be just a little bit more suggested. So I'll probably put some red in there, but I'm not gonna, it's really quite crisp in our image, which again, I kind of feel like that was altered. I could be completely wrong, but the water is so blurred down here, but then the reflection of the flower is so crisp. So it feels kind of awkward to me. And like I said, I could be really wrong about that. Maybe that's exactly how it would look, but it's not what I want to see. So I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to worry about it. Like I said, I'll put some of the color in the reflection. Just as a refresher, I'm going to zoom in here so you can see exactly how I'm doing this. See, it's just the tip of my brush. Just scrub over that line. It's light pressure. See, I'm not really depositing anything. Put a little bit of pressure to deposit some paint up on the tip, just to scumble it in, get it to blend over here. And always remember that if you start seeing paint lift, stop. Don't try to make that paint go back. If you see that you pulled a bunch of paint up, don't try and put the paint back down. Just stop, let it dry, come back to it. I think you have a pretty good idea. I'm just gonna kind of zoom you out there so you can see how everything is, kind of working together. While I finish up this part, doing it all exactly the same. Okay, I'm gonna let that dry because I'm gonna go back into my blue. I might bring a little bit of that red in, and I don't wanna start getting muddy. Okay, this is all dry now. And what I'm gonna do now is go through with my blue, take away a little bit of the screen, blend some of it out, and just kind of see what happens. For now, I'm gonna stick with my number 8. And I feel like I need some lighter blue in there, so just a little bit. Mix it with my white. Do want to keep the tiniest, teensiest amount of that yellow in there so that I have just a bit of a green tone to the blue. I don't want to make it green. Little matte medium. There we go. Just kind of scratch some of that in here and there. Use it nice and thin so that I don't completely obliterate any of the colors underneath. I know some of you are going to ask if you can, just use a little extra water to get this same effect. And technically, yes. However, it will underbind your paint. And then when you go to layer, like I'm doing here, anything that's already there that's been underbound is going to get lifted. It's going to be removed. So you're going to end up really with just one layer of paint that's maybe a little bit muddy because it's about 4 layers of paint all mixed together. Just picked up a little bit more white. I'm just kind of sketching it on where I want to see it. Then a little matte medium to smooth it. I think I'm just going to kind of keep this lighter color toward the back in there. Now let's go a little bit darker, a little more blue. Actually, I'm going to grab just a little more, darken that up. And let's really kind of sketch through and kind of blend in a bit of that green. Like I said, that green is dry, so it's not actually blending, but with a little matte medium, it kind of looks like it's blended and just kind of a hazy reflection. That is exactly what I wanted to see there. I'll let some parts of it still be nice and solid green. I want that darker. There we go. Love that layered effect. I just think it looks so much more dimensional than just, plopping down the color and maybe blending it. Blending and layering look totally different. They really do have such a different appearance. Let's get a little bit of a lighter color here and fill in this bit. Notice I'm not being overly careful around the edge of my flower. I went over into it in a couple of places and I just didn't even worry about it being there at all. You know, dealing with one little piece here and there is one thing, but painting the whole background and then dealing with it, that's completely different and not something I want to do. A little more yellow. I am almost ready to start working in the reds, but just because I move into the red doesn't mean that I can't come back and, you know, work on the green or the blue or any of that. I can always come back and change any of my colors. For your benefit, I will try and keep that to a minimum so we don't have a 45-hour long video again this week, but you know, just so you're aware that anything can be changed. You're never stuck with anything. I know that once I have the red in here, I will have to come back and just make some touch-ups because I don't know exactly where I want that red to be just yet. All right, let's start adding some of our red in. So I have my quinacridone and a little bit of Payne's Gray. So I'm gonna load up with quinacridone. I think I'm gonna throw a bit of phthalo blue in there. So that darkens it really nicely. Don't want it quite so purple. There we go. And I think I will throw a bit of Payne's Gray in there. Just get a really dark color, but I don't want it to be like a dead black. Roll off some of that. All right, let's just decide where we're gonna lay that in. Ooh, yeah. It's a little transparent. That's just the nature of all three of those colors. They're all very transparent. So we'll have to do a little bit of layering. Just grab a bit more quinacridone. With some Payne's Gray, that phthalo was a little bit purplier than I wanted. That's not too bad, but we'll let that dry and we can come back and work on it later. Get the transparency gone. I'm just gonna indicate where I want that to be. A little right up in here. I'm actually going to go to my number 5 round because these areas are going to be a little more subtle. There's fewer of them and I want to be able to control control them a little bit better. So I'm going to come into here and just kind of roll it just a little bit. Little matte medium. I'm just going to kind of break up this bottom edge a bit. I know this purple is kind of aggressive, and you might be looking at it going, uh-oh, that's not what we want to see at all, but I think let's just wait to judge that until it's all in there. I mean, we've already started it. It's already in there. So if we stop, see, this is just quinacridone and Payne's Gray, darkening it up much nicer. So if we stop now and do something different, that one spot that we did is going to look weird. It's going to be out of place. So I'm just going to continue because I already have to do something to change it later. So I might as well change all of them so that they all look the same. Just little scratches of it here and there. I'm actually not terribly unhappy with that. So I'm going to mix a good amount of matte medium in there. I want this part really transparent. I'm just going to give some little indications of it back here. See, just kind of scribbling that on there. Really light pressure. Notice my brush isn't bending. And if I have canvas texture I don't like, just a little point of matte medium to smooth that out. Same thing with the Quinn and Payne's Gray. So I'm going to lay this in first. It's kind of where the water is moving around the edge of the petals. I know that it can be really easy to start freaking out when, when you do something, you're like, oh, I don't think that's what I wanted. And then you can start kind of freaking out and panicking, and everything else seems to go wrong after that. So, I could easily do that right now. This isn't exactly the color I wanted, and it's not so far looking like I wanted it to. However, I have confidence in my ability to make changes, and so I'm keeping that in mind, that I can make any changes that I want. So the reason I tell you I know it can be easy to start freaking out is because I can for sure feel the desire to go, oh, this is not what I wanted. This isn't how I wanted it to look. And to let that kind of take over me. But, you know, you can't, because if you do that, if you let that take over you, then it really is the end of your painting. It really, you know, you'll start making decisions that you don't actually like, and it'll get worse. So what I like to do when I notice that happening is take a break, completely get away from it, and come back to it a little bit later. So I may do that. If you're right here with me and you're like, oh no, it's time to freak out, just don't freak out. Let's let it dry. And we'll come back in just a few minutes and decide how it looks then. I'll darken that just a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna give it about 15 minutes. That gives me a break from it, and it also gives it the opportunity to dry, so we can come back and touch up the water and see how it's actually looking. Okay, so I took a little bit longer of a break than I anticipated, and today is the next day, so this is completely dry. Let's start adding some of our blue and see if we can kick back this purple a little bit. Okay, so I'm gonna get some blue, mix it with my white. Just a nice deep blue color, tiniest point of yellow, little matte medium. And let's kind of scoot under the edge of this color. So right up into it a bit. Just really haze the line between what's blue and what's that crazy purple. I'm going to pull a little extra blue into that, darken it just a bit, because coming out of that dark color, I feel like I want to see my blue just a little bit deeper. There we go. I'm even taking that blue almost all the way to the top of that purple, quite transparently. Much better. That is already much closer to what I wanted to see. Let's do that on this other side. This larger bit. Sorry. Oops, a little matte medium. And I'm just gonna scoot right under it. Blend it over the top of that green. Okay, I'm actually not unhappy with that purpley color anymore. I'm just gonna kind of glaze a bit of this blue over bits of it. It's kind of at the bottom. I'm kind of keeping it toward the bottom of those purple shapes. So I'll zoom in here in just a sec and show you exactly what I mean. Let me just finish this bit up. Little matte medium. Make sure that I transition to the green nicely as well. So I'm going to get a bit of this dark blue and then just lightly mix it in here. Little point of matte medium. Just tap it in there. So here, what I'm going to do is just using the tip of my brush, I'm going to go across the bottom edge. See that, the bottom edge? Very lightly sketch it out. I ended up with more paint on my brush than I had anticipated. So I'm just going to wipe that. Very light pressure. See, I took it almost all the way to the top of that shape. And now I can take either a lighter color, just picked up a little white, or matte medium, or both, whatever I feel like, and blend out any other lines I don't like. I feel like maybe I had too much green there, so I'm just going to take a bit of that over it. Smooth, because this part's kind of blurry in the background. Maybe a little under this one. Never afraid to, you know, overlap colors. That's one thing that I see a lot of is, you know, when we paint like this, it seems like sometimes some people are afraid to overlap colors. So they get their colors on there, like here, but they try really hard to keep this blue, let's say, into the white area, and they don't want to take it over the purple. But then you end up having a line that you don't like. Just take it over the purple. Look at that. I have a white bit over there. I'm not going to try and keep it, you know, off the purple or green. I'm just going to go right over the purple and fill in that white bit. Acrylic paint, even opaque colors, they tend to have a bit of a translucency to them. And we can control that by, you know, first of all, knowing what colors are transparent and what colors aren't. And, you know, if a color is transparent, use that transparency to your advantage. And if a color is not transparent, use other materials to your advantage, such as matte medium. You know, I can take white if I need, white being quite an opaque color, but I could make white as transparent as I need it, and add a little highlight down here, by using matte medium. Just a little bit of a highlight in there. I'm using very little pressure. See that? My brush is not bending. It's just barely scraping over that color. I'm just going to kind of touch up my blue. I have a couple areas where the white of the canvas is still showing. And then I think we're ready to move on to the flower. Spend as much time on the water as you like, you know, adding highlights and shadows and color variations. I think that the more time you spend on it, the more variation there is to it, the happier you'll be with it. And my natural inclination is to kind of, you know, dig in and spend quite a bit of time on this water, you know, shadows and highlights and reflections. And but I don't want to have a 20-hour video again, so I'm not going to. I'll do a little bit so you get the idea, but just a bit of white. Some nice bright highlight back here. I don't have that in my image, but I want to see it, so I'm gonna do it. See, I'm kind of sketching that. So a little there, bring it down a bit, maybe zag it that way. Let's get a bit on the other side, and I think I might almost be ready to move on. Let's go into the blue, little white, tiny, tiny speck of yellow. Let's deepen that blue. Blur it out with some matte medium. And maybe I'll throw a little extra yellow in there. Maybe a little bit of Payne's Gray. I'm just mixing up what I've got on my plate. Throw a little Quinn in there to drab it down. There. I'm just going to take a bit of this kind of drabby green color that I made and throw it in here. Just filling in these little white specks. I'm going to put some, little more of like a pop type highlight here once we're done with our flower. But for now, I think that works. And I'm going to do the same color just in this little spot over here. A little more yellow and matte medium there, since I was already blending into the green. Okay, so I'm pretty much going to work on each petal individually. So I'm going to use my 1/2 inch filbert for this, and I'm using really the same colors as in the rose. I've got quinacridone and cad red medium. And I'm going to pull out a little quinacridone. I'm going to lean this whole thing a little closer on the quinacridone side. A little bit of the cad red medium to deepen it a bit. And I'm going to start with my back petals. Nice crisp edges. The reason I'm starting with the petals in the back is because they're harder to cut around a little bit. So if I start with the ones in the front and then move to the ones in the back, I might paint over a petal that I just painted, and that would be not fun. So that's why I'm starting in the back. You do it however you feel the most comfortable. This is a little bit of, you know, kind of a precise effort getting into these little bits and crevices. So take your time. Again, you can be just as successful as you need to be, as you want to be, but you have to be patient. You know, if you come in here and start painting in your petals and get impatient and then just start kind of slapping the paint on because you're impatient filling in all of the little pieces to the petals, I think that that's going to show in your finished piece. And one thing I'm going to do is each petal is going to be a little bit different. I just picked up a little white, maybe just the tiniest poke of matte medium. I'm taking a little bit of a cue from my reference image, but ultimately I'm not going to necessarily try and completely mimic, you know, every petal, every color in my reference image. Maybe just a little bit more white right up at the top. Break it up into different directions. Kind of tap the color in. There's a cat hair in my brush. Much better. It's funny how it's so much easier to control when there's not a cat hair that's sending your paint outside of your shape. kind of dotting it. Let's do the one next to it. I've zoomed you in here so that you can get a little bit of a better idea of the type of brush stroke I'm using. Mixed up roughly the same color. It might be a little more on the cad red side or quinacridone. I don't really care. So I'm going to bring in the shape. But having each petal be ever so slightly different from the one next to it is going to help ensure it doesn't end up just looking like a pink blob. So you know where it butts up against another petal, just make sure that that petal is either lighter or darker or more on the cad red side, more on the quin side, whatever you need to do, just so it looks ever so slightly different. So you're just worried about filling in all the little white spots. And I'm going to grab just a tiny point of white, decide where there's a highlight, and I'm just going to kind of start dotting it on. See that? See, my brush isn't bending. If you pick up too much paint, this is going to be really difficult. And if you're putting too much pressure, remember you can always get more paint. You can always go back for more. But if you get too much, that's going to be difficult to deal with. See, it's very, very subtle. And let's keep going. A little more quin, just deepen that area. Also, if your flower, if you want it a little darker, throw a hint of that Payne's Gray in with the quinacridone because it'll give you a nice deep purple. A little heavier on my cad red here. This one is almost completely folded over. This one in my image is quite dark at the bottom. So I'm going to pull just a little bit of that Payne's Gray in. Payne's Gray has quite a bit of a blue base, so it works nice. I may end up coming back later with a smaller brush to work on my details. We'll see. I want you to think of this flower in very simple terms, though. You know, don't think of it as a flower. In fact, I want you to think of it as individual shapes. Just look at each shape. You know, take one petal at a time. If you take one petal at a time, that will also make it easier for you to work in, you know, in short bursts if you need to. If you only have 20 minutes, maybe all you got done was one petal, and that's okay. Maybe all you got done was, you know, 2 petals. But if you can do it like that, just, you know, take it one petal at a time, then you won't stress yourself out so bad about, you know, not being able to get your painting done in one sitting, or, you know, being a slow painter. I don't know what that fascination is. Well, it's not fascination. I don't know what the issue is, why some people think that being a, you know, slow painter is a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It's just a thing. That's how fast you paint. This is how fast I paint. Everybody is different. A lot of you paint faster than I do. You know, when we did the rose painting, I had people post their version of the painting to my Instagram that day. There's no way I could do that painting all in one day. That's just not, that would have been way too fast for me. I would not have been able to put the time and attention into it that I felt like I needed to in one day. But they did, and it looked great, and that was awesome. Good for them. So what I'm saying is my time frame does not need to be your time frame or anyone else's. Let's throw a little Payne's Gray in there at the bottom here. Oh, I kind of lost my chalk line there from putting my hand on the canvas. A little white. Let's just brighten up the top edge here. It was kind of getting lost in those petals on the other side. There we go. Much better. In fact, I think I'm going to do that a little right here too. Okay, I'm really gonna do the same thing on the rest of these petals, so I may just kind of zone out for a minute and do my little thing, so I hope that you do too. Now these petals we're getting to around the front start getting a little bit more white to them. And also I feel like a little bit more on the side of quinacridone. So I'm going to start with mostly a quinacridone base. There's still all those other colors in my brush. I haven't cleaned it off. We'll get a good amount of white going in the highlight. Now I think after standing back and looking at this, I think I am probably gonna come back with a smaller brush once it's dried so I can bump up the highlights and shadows. Just a little bit here and there. I don't think I'm gonna go too terribly crazy with it, but you know, just a bit. So there's a bit of a lighter color along the edge of that petal. Wipe that off, a little Payne's gray with my quinacridone. And we'll get a bit of a shadow in here. See what a lovely color that makes. It keeps the quinacridone, you know, fairly true. It doesn't dull it out. If you use Mars Black, which you certainly can if you don't have any Payne's gray, if you use Mars Black, it's really going to make the color a little more dull. But the Payne's gray keeps it a nice warm, vivid color, but it just makes it nice and dark. I'm going to mix up quite a light color. This one here, and in our image it's got a little yellow in it. I'm not going to do that. I don't think. We'll see. Right now I don't feel like I'm going to do that. Cuts in front of that petal. See how I took that line? You can see a bit of a line from this edge up into here. Just kind of helps make it look like it's folded over, but I didn't have to work for it so much. A little bit of white. Yeah, I'm gonna have to come back once it's all dry a bit. This one in our image is really kind of brown, but I don't want to do that. I'm going to go pale like this, and then I'll just make the one side quite dark. So let's get that pale color for this side. See, I know that I hear a lot of questions about, you know, well, it's this color right here. I don't know how to make it that color, or it looks weird when I make it that color, or whatever. If something doesn't work for you, if you look at an image and you're like, I don't like that part, don't do it. And sometimes when you're painting, simplifying it anyway works better than not, because sometimes what works in a photo or what's accepted in a photo is not what works or is accepted in a painting. So, for example, the blue area that I left off in the background, I felt like if I put that blue area in, it would really stand out, and I felt like it would look strange. So I left it out completely. Just kind of dashing that about to the middle. I'm going to keep it just a little darker, mostly with just quinacridone. I'm just picking up a little extra quinacridone to kind of dash in at the bottom here, where it meets the water. Now I'm going to wash off my brush. And I washed it off really just because it had a lot of white in it. I want to get my quinacridone, my Payne's gray. Quite a dark color. Maybe I'll throw just a little cad red in there. Nice messy dark color. And we'll do this side. I'm going to leave just a hint on the edge because I do need to come back with that lighter color. Give it a bit of a highlight on this right edge. See, I like that much better than that brownish color that was in the reference image. I'm going to bring it right up to that image. To that edge. I'm not going to worry about blending it just yet. A little more Payne's Gray. More quinacridone and white. Quinacridone. I'm not sure what I just said there. And I'm lightly going to dash over that transition. So blending those two sides is going to kind of be like when we're blending in the background and the water. Right now I'm just getting that color in there. Notice I didn't worry about really blending it too much. Just going to kind of tap with my finger. There we go. I just wiped my brush on my paper towel. I didn't clean it. Just wiped it, grab a little of that lighter color. And same thing, just kind of tapping right there. So I'm going to get a nice smooth transition, a little matte medium. It's not going to be exactly the same as in the image, and that's okay. There we go. Oh, I like that much better. Because that Payne's Gray and quinacridone is so transparent, I'm going to have to let that side dry for a little bit. But, God, I feel like I want to bring it over to the left just a little bit more. My very dark color. Just a bit more right here. All right, we're going to leave that for a few minutes and work on our next petal that's kind of on the darker side, right here. I guess I probably should have finished those petals behind it first. That's all right. That's just a comfort thing. You know, that makes me feel more comfortable to do the ones behind it before I do the ones in front, but it's okay. And let's get some white in there for this edge. Then we'll finish up those couple of interior petals, kick in our shadows and highlights in a few places, and like I said, I'm not going to go too crazy with that. I might touch a couple of highlights into the water. Oh, we still have to do our reflection. That should be quick. I'm not going to put a lot of energy into that. So you're just kind of dotting over that line there. Yeah, I'm glad I decided to do this darker, the darker version of these colors rather than trying to get that yellow into there. I didn't really care for that little yellowy brown bit in the photo. I mean, it looks great in the photo, but not what I wanted to do in my painting. And I'll take that color down this edge. I know that looks really horrible right now, but we will come back and get it touched up in just a bit. And this petal's a little darker on the left side than it is on the right side. So we'll just kind of lay that little Payne's gray in there. Oops, see, it's so much easier to work from the back toward the front. And you don't have to worry about, you know, painting into the ones in the front that you've already done. All right, let's go ahead and do our reflections. I'm back to my number 8. Get my red mixture. It's quite dark. It's the same colors as we have, but it's darker, so I'm going to throw a little Payne's gray in there. Same thing. Remember, I'm not getting crazy with the details. I'm not going to paint the flower all over again in here. I'm just going to lay the color in and call that good. It's okay that it overlaps the blue. It's okay if it touches the green, overlaps it a little. In fact, it's preferred. Do not just stop it where it touches another color. That's going to look kind of awkward. And just change up the color a little here and there, maybe a little more red, maybe even a little pink. See, I'm kind of sketching it into the blue because I know that that blue is transparent, so I can kind of glaze back over it, kick some of that back, but still keep the impression that that reflection is there. All right, I'm going to let that dry. Then we'll come back with the blue. All right, let's amp up our shadows and highlights here. I'm going to try and do this fairly simply and quick. And I'm going to go to my number 8 filbert, a little bit smaller. I'll be able to work on details a little bit more. Now, the thing I want to focus on here is making my shadows nice and dark and my highlights nice and bright. So I've got my red color. I'm just going to get a bit of this in here to start. Kind of doing my little sketchy bit, and we'll get a little bit of white. And see, working with those transparent colors, it's almost always good to do 2 layers. You get so much more depth. You get rid of little brushstroke marks that you might not like and have a hard time getting rid of in one single layer. And I didn't really want to spend a whole ton of time coming back and doing this again, just to try and keep the video a little on the shorter side. But, I'd rather have it look right than have the video be shorter, so you know how to fast forward if you don't want to watch this part. I'm going to do all of my highlights and then I'll come back and do all of my shadows. And not all of the petals have to be highlighted. Some of them can be, substantially darker than others. You can make that determination as you go based on what you want to see and how you feel you need to make one petal stand out from, the background or another petal. So see, all I'm doing is just taking that red color, just kind of laying it in there again. I'm not being specific with my color either. Just picking up my reds, however they come up. A little bit of white, wherever I want that highlight. I'm not even looking at my reference image at this point, and I know that my highlights are more intense than in my image, but I felt like I really needed it. I like that little bit of texture that I'm getting from just tapping it. It does kind of mimic the texture on the petals in the image. I feel like that one was just too dark right there at the tip. Just a tiny point of white. And you can go as light as you like, you know, if you like a completely pink lotus instead, that's fine. Notice I'm totally ignoring the bottom area where my shadow is going to be. Once we're done with these petals, we can work on the water reflection, which I don't think is going to take too terribly much time. And then I think we'll be about done. See, just like before, it's just that little dabbing motion. With very light pressure, it helps to blend the colors, but not deposit a ton of paint. Little bits of matte medium to just kind of help blend. You know the routine with matte medium. Little quinacridone there. I didn't want to take that white down quite so far. There we go. I just wiped my brush off on my plate just to get off some of that extra red. I didn't clean it off. I'm going to get some white. I have a little matte medium, and we're going to highlight here. Make sure this is nice and bright. There we go. Much better. I wasn't able to get it quite so light before because the paint was so wet. Quinacridone and a little bit of matte medium because I got that white a little bit too far. There we go. And same thing on this edge. I want to take this edge quite bright. At least right there. Matte medium. Little matte medium to smooth out that line, and then we can bump our shadows. And I am not going to put a lot of time and energy into our shadows, I promise. We're going to do these shadows pretty quick. I think I'm just going to use a little bit of quinacridone, and that's it for these shadow areas. It's quite transparent, so I shouldn't need too much matte medium or anything. Just kind of lay it in there. Yeah, and because I had already put in that darker area with the Payne's gray, it's really just kind of glazing over that, and I think that looks really good. I don't know what happened there. Yeah, I think that's looking much, much better. See, I'm not picking up anything, not even matte medium, just quinacridone all by itself. Just laying it over top of everything except my highlights. I'm not really putting it over my highlights. And everything just kind of glows through. So I maintain my texture, but create a suggestion of a shadow. And I think, let's try it here. I think I'm going to do that on these petals as well. Yep, there we go. I am glazing that ever so slightly over the highlight, just kind of scribbling it. And same thing here, I'm just going to take it right over that dark area. A little matte medium just to get rid of some texture from the canvas. Back to my scrubby filbert, some phthalo blue, some white, nice deep. Let's go quite dark actually. Little matte medium, little point of yellow. There we go. Right over the edge of that, where that pink is. I've been painting for so long today that my matte medium is drying out. That's when you know you've been busy that day. Your matte medium dries out. A little more white in there. Clearly, I don't want to cover up all of this quinacridone or the red color, but I want to make it look like it belongs in there. That's looking much better. I'm just changing up my blue a little bit every time I go back for more. Keeping a little matte medium. do make sure that you wait until the quinacridone or the red color is dry before you go in here, because you don't want to mix. I'm gonna get a bit of white. There we go. Felt like the water was really missing some bright. One more thing I'm going to do, back to my number 5 round, a little bit of white just right on the edge. I'm kind of flattening my brush out so that I can get a nice sharp bit. And I'm just going to kind of touch little bits of this white highlight in here. See that? Just little suggestions of it. In some places it doesn't show up hardly at all. In other places much more. And we can even take it down this little edge where our water tension is. If it was too intense, a little matte medium to smooth out the underside of it. There. See, I'm not outlining this whole water edge area. Zoom it in there a bit so you can see. Little highlight there where it meets back up with the surface of the water. Overall, I'm fairly happy with it. I do feel like I rushed a little bit here and there, so I wish I would have taken a bit more time, but I think I'll call it good.